Hello and welcome to Easy Piecy Quilts. Today we're going to change gears a little bit. I've been getting questions about what items people need to get their quilting journey started. So I have compiled 10 things that I think if you have these items, you'll be well set on your way to make your first quilt. I've included affiliate links to make it easy for you to find these items. And number 10 really isn't a must, but it certainly will make things faster and easier for you. So I'm really excited looking back over my quilting journey, coming up with 10 things that I use literally every day when I'm making a quilt. I'm excited to share these items with you. Without being too obvious, number 1 is a sewing machine. You can hand stitch a quilt. That is not me. So I thought I would share a little bit about my first quilting sewing machine. These are still around, actually. They are very good sellers because they are workhorse machines. They are very strong. I've sewn soft leather with this and it has had no problem going through the layers. It will have no problem going through the layers of your quilt, which is nice. It is a fast machine. It does 1,500 stitches per minute. And if you would like to free motion quilt on your machine, that is nice because you want a machine that can move a little bit faster. The other nice thing about this machine with free motion quilting is that you can drop the feed dogs, which you don't want to have the feed dogs that are pulling the fabric through your machine active when you're free motion quilting. And so that is a nice feature of this machine. It will cut your thread automatically for you, which is really nice. It also allows you to use the cone threads, which, you know, the smaller threads, once you get quilting a big quilt, things like that, you'll go through a lot of those. It's nice to be able to use the bigger cones of thread. And so that makes things nice. This machine also features a bigger throat space. And that is designed for quilting because when you're piecing your blocks, it doesn't matter so much how big your throat space is. But once you start putting those blocks together, you'll notice that you need more room to get your quilt in between the needle and the throat of the machine, or in the throat of the machine. And so it's nice because this one does have a little bit bigger throat space for that, specifically for quilting. It also comes with this table, which again, once you get to piecing your blocks together and you get that larger amount of fabric with your quilt top coming together, it is nice to have this extra surface and work area on this table. So that makes things nice. And I think that brother machines tend to have a little bit of extra without the extra cost. They are very good machines and I've always enjoyed my brother, but there are many other machines out there, other companies that have wonderful sewing machines, and the sewing machine that is right for you is the perfect sewing machine. The next must-have is a cutting mat. This cutting mat is really nice because it is large. It is 24 by 36 inches, which makes it really nice when you're trimming your quilt top after you've quilted it. It gives you a large surface to cut. The other thing that is really nice about these cutting mats is that they are double-sided. So there are a lot of times where you will cut the same size pieces over and over again, or you'll use a certain part of your mat a little bit more than others. And so you will have a lot of wear and tear in that area and it won't cut as well over the course of a year or two. And this mat's nice because you just flip it over and you can get double the use out of the same mat. And I find that this one is very good, self-healing, and it works very well for everyday quilting. The next must-have is a quilt ruler. This ruler is invaluable. It is 6 inches wide by 24 inches tall. And the reason that I use this quilt ruler literally every time I go into my quilting room is because it cuts yardage. Yardage is typically 42, 45 inches wide, and then folded in half like it comes on the bolts, it's usually around 21 to 22 inches. So this ruler easily cuts across that so that you can do strips. You can then subcut those strips for any quilt piece practically that you need for a block. So this ruler is something that I do not ever go without touching for a day. It is a must-have. Our next item is a rotary blade. I have always used the 45 millimeter rotary blade. That is the size of the blade. They have larger ones, 60 millimeters, but those are going to be a little bit cumbersome when you're trying to do smaller cuts for smaller pieces. So I've never really had a problem even with 1-inch cuts with the 45 millimeter blade, and they're very readily available at any craft store. This rotary blade is nice. I like the size of the handle. It feels good in my hand, but there is a little button here that will retract the protective cover from the blade. And it's a manual thing that you have to remember to do. And it is a little bit difficult, I think, as well, to kind of move it up and down. It takes a little bit of strength. And so this is not my favorite rotary blade. I have one that is made by Fiskar, and this one I have made every single quilt I've ever made with this rotary blade. I think it's awesome, and as a matter of fact, I think I need to treat myself to a new one. But the reason that this one is so nice is because it locks. So you can see that there's a cover over the blade. You can lock that with this button here so that you can't push this handle down. But when you do unlock it and push the handle down, it will automatically retract that cover away from the blade so that you can make your cut. And you're already squeezing that handle whenever you're holding the rotary blade. So it just kind of is an automatic thing. And then when you set it down, it automatically retracts again. So this is a really nice rotary blade that I would recommend. So this next must-have, I wish I didn't have to tell you about, but everybody uses it. It's a seam ripper. And I like this seam ripper in particular because it has a nice larger handle to it. It's just easier to grip, in my opinion. And it has a cover, of course. This one I got in a pack of several that were similar, but they were different colors. And so that's nice because things move around in your quilting room and it's hard to find sometimes little items. And so it's nice because there are several available in the pack. And the other thing about a seam ripper is this is okay. We make mistakes. I make mistakes. I used this exact seam ripper earlier today on the quilt that I am doing now. So this is an item that is a necessary evil, I guess you could say, in your quilt room, but it is handy. And every time you make a mistake, you learn something, so it's worth it. These little scissors are invaluable. I use them all the time to snip threads. I snip my dog ears with these. I use them on my quilter for thread snipping and things like that. So they are really, really nice. They're super sharp, and the point on them is really sharp as well. So you can get very accurate cuts with these little scissors. And the great thing too is they come in multi-packs. I don't know what it is. It's the same thing with the seam ripper. You can never find these. I found my daughter cutting out her cardboard school project with them just this week. So it's nice to have a relatively cheap pair of snips that work really well, and they come in a multi-pack. So that's a win-win. Everybody needs quilting pins. And I don't pin a whole lot. I try and nest my seams so that it saves me time when I'm putting things together, putting blocks together, even putting rows of a quilt top together. A lot of times I do not put one pin in that, but pins are necessary. There's a lot of times where I will have two parts of a block that I don't want to shift when I'm putting them together. And so those are an opportunity to use pins to stabilize that and make sure that you have a nice lined up block. And I use flathead quilting pins. These are nice because they allow you to put two pieces of fabric together. And then if you have to trim or do something with one of your quilting rulers while you're using the pin, it's flat. So that will lie flat against your cutting mat. You can go ahead and put your quilting ruler over there and it won't disrupt where you have things pinned in place. And that this particular variety has flowers on it. They have some that have little birds on them that are really cute. And my daughter got me this pin cushion that I use for my pins. So quilting pins are a must. In quilting, we use 1/4 inch seam allowance. So a 1/4 inch presser foot is really, really handy to make accurate seams. And it may not seem like an accurate seam would be all that important. And a lot of people say that as long as all of your seams are off, then it's okay. But if you have a lot of piecing in a quilt top, the closer you can get to accurate, the better your quilt top is going to look and the easier it's going to be for you to put your blocks together and the blocks together into a quilt top. So these 1/4 inch presser feet that you can put on your sewing machine to assure that you're getting that 1/4 inch seam are really helpful. And most of them are universal, so you can buy one and it'll fit on most machines. The other thing is, if you get a quilting machine specifically, it should have a 1/4 inch presser foot. And there are different ones, and I would encourage you to try out a couple of different ones and see which one you like the best and are most comfortable with, because in the end of the day, it's what you're using, what you like, and as long as it works, then it works for you. There are various 1/4 inch presser feet, and here is one of them. But my favorite is this one, and it has a little flange, I guess you could call it, on the end or on one of the sides that is kind of like a guide for that 1/4 inch seam, which is nice. The only thing that this one gets a little tricky is if you're sewing over seams, it can kind of catch on some of the fabric sometimes. So I do flip-flop from this one, and if I'm doing some kind of a particular piecing where that becomes a problem, I will switch over to this guy. But this one is my go-to, and I will put him on here. And you can see that it just lines up right with the edge of the fabric and gives you that 1/4 inch seam that you need to do all of your quilts. So that makes it really easy to eyeball that and get an accurate seam. Every seam on a quilt top has to be pressed. You will use your iron constantly when you are making a quilt. I have a mini iron that I use, and it's right next to my sewing machine, which makes it nice so that when I sew a seam, I can a lot of times just go ahead right next to my sewing machine and press it. And that makes things go faster and you kind of get a rhythm with that. This particular iron is nice because it gets very, very hot. It has a silicone mat that it sits on. I also like this particular iron because it has a nice point here. So a lot of times I press a lot of my seams open. So that point really allows you to press your seams open a lot more easily. I think really the only thing you need in an iron for quilting is that it gets hot. A lot of irons, believe it or not, don't get as hot as what you would like. And those seams will lay flat and they will press very, very nicely, and it will make things a lot easier on you to have a nice hot iron. Number 10. So this is our last must-have item. And honestly, it is not really a must-have, but it will make your life so much easier and it will make your quilting so much faster. It is diagonal seam tape. This is a really inexpensive item that you can find at any quilt shop online. And the great thing about it is there are lots of times where you're making half square triangles, or you're doing what we call the stitch and flip method of making a seam for a quilt. And this seam tape will allow you to forego marking the back of all of those squares, and you can put this on your machine, and it's washi tape. So it will not damage your machine. It comes off very easily, and it has 3 lines on it. And these lines will allow you to sew from corner to corner on your fabrics without marking them, and it is invaluable. There are lots of times, particularly in my patterns, where there is a stitch and flip, or a time when you have to sew across a square. Typically that requires you to mark a line across the smaller square or the lighter colored square and to sew on that line. And that takes time, you know, to mark all those squares, things like that. But with this diagonal seam tape, you can see that you can line up this corner with this seam tape, the red line. You can do things with the other lines as well, like if you're doing half square triangles, things like that. But just for the sake of argument for this particular application, so you can see that you can feed this piece of fabric through your machine very accurately and straight, just by following that red line with your corner all the way up and through. And that saves you having to mark all those squares, and it's easier, faster, accurate, and it is a lot more fun when you can do things more quickly. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to make a quilt. These things are things that I use every day in my quilting experience and journey, and I hope that they are helpful to you as well. Stay tuned to our channel, subscribe, like this video if you thought it was helpful, and we'll see you next time.